Dear friends from all over Europe, a warm welcome from the European Movement Office here in Brussels. Thank you very much for joining us for another edition of Talking Europe, organized in partnership between the European Commission and the European Movement International. Our objective is to tackle and discuss some of the main issues of our times, and what a bigger question for us to sink our teeth in than the current geopolitical environment that we live in. We have the pleasure of hosting with us the Secretary General of the European External Action Service, Stefano Sannino, who will be taking us through the EU's response to the war in Ukraine and Putin's brutal invasion of a European state, but also discussing a bit more the proposals that have been put on the table to reform the way that the EU positions itself at the global stage. Stefano, thank you very much for coming with us. We know you have a lot on, but there's a very eager and interesting audience around Europe keen to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Petros, and thanks for hosting me this morning.
Indeed, a pleasure. I need to start, of course, by discussing the situation in Ukraine. We are now 2 months into Putin's invasion, and a lot of things have happened. We've seen awful sides of brutality and war crimes, but the fact remains that a European nation is under attack and its sovereignty has been violated as a result. The EU also has taken unprecedented action to show solidarity and support Ukraine, pulling member states together, but also taking a very active role within NATO. Perhaps we can start a discussion with commenting a little bit on the European Union's response.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, first of all, to say that I fully agree with you. This is a brutal attack. This is something that is, let's say, unprecedented in terms of what has happened. I mean, sometimes we had the feeling, we have had the feeling that this was belonging to the past, and all of a sudden we have been obliged to face the consequences of, as you said, of a brutal attack of a country, and by the way, a permanent member of the Security Council that holds a special responsibility from that point of view, to an independent, democratic countries, whose only guilt was that of willing to get closer to the European Union, to become even more open economically, socially, politically. So it is really brutal what we are witnessing. We have responded as European Union, I would say, in 2 ways. First of all, how to support and enhance the resilience of Ukraine from all points of view, starting from the military perspective, and then how to support them in terms of fight against cyber attacks, how to support it economically and financially, and this has been unprecedented in terms of speed, in terms of amount, in terms of magnitude of this assistance. And I think that what is coming to mind in particular is the military assistance. Is the first time that European Union goes so clearly and so flatly into this area. As EU, we have mobilized 1.5 billion euro in order to support member states in their efforts. But I mean, many member states are doing it much more than that collectively, and we have created a clearinghouse in order to facilitate this process together with NATO. Even from that point of view, I need to mention the request of Ukraine to join the European Union, the very quick request from the Council to the Commission to provide an opinion on this. And now we are waiting, and I suppose that the Commission will be very quick in giving us an opinion on how to move forward in getting the Ukraine closer to the European Union. And then the second strand of work is the one of sanctions against Russia, of isolation of Russia within the international arena, and how to make it clear to Russia, first of all, that we were deeply unsatisfied with the way they were managing their relations with Ukraine, but also our rejection of this brutal aggression towards Ukraine. And there too, we have had an unprecedented set of sanctions in terms of quantities, in terms of impact. And unfortunately, we are continuing in this perspective. We are at the 5th package, and soon, I suppose, there will be a 6th one. Finally, as I was saying, at the point of the isolation, we have had the 3 resolutions in the General Assembly, 2 condemning the aggression towards Ukraine and support for humanitarian assistance, and the 3rd one, which is essentially asking Russia to leave the Human Rights Council, suspending Russia from the Human Rights Council. So, I mean, from that point of view, also a very strong work in terms of isolation, international isolation of Russia.
In many ways, the EU has been leading the effort, the response to this invasion, and I think that in itself is significant. You did mention the activization of the peace facility and the supply of military equipment to Ukraine, which is indeed quite unique, a new move from the side of the EU. And I'll come to that, but maybe first discuss a little bit the sanctions. Are you satisfied with the effect that the sanctions are currently having? Do you think, because again, the European Union moved extremely quickly and forcefully to impose those sanctions. Are you seeing results at the moment? And what do you foresee for the next round of sanctions? There is a lot of discussion, of course, around energy. Are we going to be moving in that direction too?
Well, there is one thing maybe to start saying that whatever sanctions we will manage to impose, they will never be sufficient in order to, let's say, give a sense of what Russia is doing, the people that have been killed during this war, the pain that has been imposed to Ukraine. So in a way, again, I mean, whatever we are going to do, it will never be sufficient. Sanctions, as you know, have not a sort of only punitive effect, even if we have to say that this is also a clear sense, a clear sign of our disagreement with the way Russia is dealing with this situation. But they have also the determination, the willing, what is behind sanctions is to push the country to move into a different behavior. And unfortunately, this has not happened yet. That said, I mean, sanctions have been extremely strong. As I said before, I mean, never have we had this kind of impact in terms of sanctions, in terms of value, in terms of volumes, and this is very, this is having a very strong impact on the economy. See how much the economy is collapsing, how much is it going to have an impact in terms of economic and also social impact. And again, this is pushing the regime, the government, to change its attitude. We have covered a wide range of economic activities. The 6th package should, I mean, we have already in the 5th package started working on the energy side, which is certainly one very important. We did with coal. I suppose that the 6th package will also have a very strong energy component. We will present our ideas to the member states in the coming hours, I can say. And then, based also on the reaction, we will formalize our proposal. So, but I suppose that again, the energy sector will certainly be touched upon, as the financial sector will certainly be touched upon.
Indeed. And you know, all this was possible because EU member states showed unique unity in their response and solidarity towards Ukraine. How difficult it is to maintain that unity and ensure that all member states are on the same page, so we can really put a strong front vis-a-vis somebody like Putin, who is challenging the peace in our continent?
Well, I think that the unity of the member states has been very, very strong. I mean, starting from the very first reply, I can vividly remember the first European Council, where essentially the determination of all the member states was very, very strong and very, very united. Which has also allowed us, for example, to take unprecedented steps. I was referring before to the use of the European Peace Facility in order to finance delivery of arms to Ukraine. That's something that has been unheard of, and we have managed to do it in 36 hours, exactly because of this unity. This is still there. I mean, clearly, the more we move into additional sanctions, the more we are touching also specific interests of member states. We need to be careful not to have a disruptive effect also on the member states and what they're doing. But member states are ready to pay a price, and it's what they are saying very clearly. They are not shying away from taking consequences from what they are doing, from the decisions that they are taking. And I'm sure that it will continue to be the case even in the future.
I mean, obviously, what's going on in Ukraine at the moment has put the EU's role in the world in very sharp focus. And you've come forward with a comprehensive set of proposals in the context of the EU strategic compass about how the EU can really live up to its role as a player at the global stage. Would you mind taking us through some of the proposals in the strategic compass, and then we perhaps can look into the realities on the ground too?
Well, the strategic compass is, I would say, a sort of doctrine on what the European Union wants to do in terms of security and defense for the years to come. So it's however you want to call it, it's a white book, gives us an orientation of the priorities that we want to implement. The work on the strategic compass started a couple of years ago in a completely different security environment, and it has been certainly very significantly affected by what has happened in Russia in the last in Ukraine in the last few months. So we have readjusted and readapted essentially the whole security awareness definition of the compass, identifying Russia as one of the main threats to our security. And we have also seen the different chapters of the strategic compass also in that perspective. In terms of substance, the strategic compass covers a number of areas. Again, I mean, first of all, it is based on a common awareness analysis, which has been developed together with the member states. Then we are defining the areas where we want to develop a certain number of actions that we want to take. And the most relevant one from that point of view is the creation of rapid deployment capabilities of the EU that could intervene in specific scenarios once these scenarios materialize. I need to stress that we are not speaking about a European army. We are certainly not yet there. We are speaking about capabilities that still belong to member states and that can be deployed as necessary. But the added value is that we will have a lot of common exercise, a lot of interoperability and reinforced command and planning structure that could give us the possibility to be much more effective, even compared with the past and with the idea of the battle groups that sometimes is recalled when it comes to the capabilities. But once again, it's not a standing force, are forces that can be mobilized in specific circumstances. The second important point of the compass is the necessity to invest in defense, in a number of capabilities that we not have in this moment, the so-called enablers, which are very relevant because we lack of this. If we need to bring forces or we need to bring armaments in specific areas, we do not have, for example, the instrument to do so, and we need to necessarily to ask our American friends or NATO to help us in this. What we want to do is not something that is alternative to NATO, let's be clear, but we want to be complementary. We want to be able to, to do work that otherwise would create much more problems in terms of delivery. And again, we are seeing very clearly in Ukraine that this is the case. From that point of view, the European Defence Fund, the fact that within also the European budget there are significant resources devoted to this is very important, and we are working very closely with the Commission in order to use this instrument in the best possible way. The third pillar, the third area is to look at new challenges that we have in terms of security. We are speaking a lot, and unfortunately, again, about hard security, about military troops and so on. But there is a lot that is happening in terms of security when it comes to manipulation of information, for example, or when it comes to hybrid threats, or when it comes to cyber threats. In all this area, we will need to develop capabilities. We have already done a lot as European Union in the past, but still much more has to be done. And we need also to start regulating areas which are not regulated up until now, like, for example, the space, where there are no rules, and it becomes sort of far west in terms of that everybody feels free to do everything. And finally, but equally important, the fourth chapter is about partnership. We are ready, the European Union should be ready to a number of things alone, what is necessary, but before that, it needs to do all that is possible together with our allies, starting with NATO, clearly, with United Nations, with other regional organizations, African Union, ASEAN, but also with like-minded partners, UK, but even Japan, Norway, Iceland, in order to maximize the effect of the work that we can do together in order to ensure security and stability, not only to our continent, but to the world as a whole.
And this is indeed actually a very timely piece of work, because it really encapsulates the moment we are in, as well as looking into the future. And as you probably know, the conference on the future of Europe is taking place at the moment, and among other things, the role of the EU in the world is being discussed. And the European citizens who have been working on the proposals, even before the invasion of Ukraine, came forward with ideas about creating a more common European defense, so to say, even suggesting the idea of joint armed forces at some level. This is also something that has come through the questions that our audience are posting on social media and elsewhere. Do you think events in Ukraine have edged us closer to a European defense union, as such, closer cooperation, joint procurement of material and equipment, even joint forces, especially considering the result of the French presidential election last night? President Macron has been an advocate of closer defense cooperation among EU member states. Do you think political developments, as well as the situation in Ukraine, are slowly pushing us closer? And of course, keeping in mind that there seems to be appetite among the European public to see the EU cooperate more in defense. Do you think we're moving more to that direction?
And we are certainly moving much more into a direction of a much more assertive and responsible European Union in the area of security and defense. And I think that what I mentioned before, I mean, all the work that we've been doing in the last 2 years on the strategic compass, the work that we've been doing, unfortunately, in order to provide support to Ukraine under the present circumstances, the cooperation that we are having with NATO and with a number of allies of NATO that are not members of the European Union are all elements that are moving in that direction. The strategic compass is an ambitious and we hope implementable agenda for the Union. You know very well that each crisis within the European Union is moving things faster in the decision process. So we need to see all this work in a perspective. This is not going to change overnight, but let's say we can progressively create the conditions for certain development, for developments that in the present circumstances would be much more difficult to imagine. But this is certainly an area which is very sensitive, where the member states are still very jealous. I think that we need to work also to create more, I would say, integration at political level when it comes to the security and defense. So there is still a lot of work in front of us, but I mean, I can see that there is huge difference compared with a few years ago. We have created, also within the External Action Service, a very substantial structure to deal with security and defense. We can do even more in order to, let's say, to do better the management of crisis and to face better, let's say, the new challenges that we have in front of us. And the compass will give us a good sense of the direction of the work that we will need to develop in the years to come.
I mean, you mentioned the ability of the EU to take fast decisions and in difficult moments. And indeed, we have the tendency to move faster when needed. But there has been a lot of discussion around the role of the High Representative and the European External Action Service in general, and whether we need to upgrade and strengthen both the High Representative but also the External Action Service to facilitate the EU's response in that regard. Do you think that in this overall debate there is also appetite to look into the institutional architecture that can support the EU's response to such crises?
I mean, I don't know if the institutional, I mean, when we speak about institution, we always think about changes of the treaties, and this is a complex issue that sometimes requires a lot of energies, and the result is not necessarily ensured. I think that the treaties are already providing a lot of possibilities to strengthen the role of the High Representative and of the External Action Service. At the end of the day, I would say that the most of the elements are there, are already in the treaties and already in the decision, which is creating the External Action Service. The point is how to implement fully this legal framework that we have in place. I would like maybe to refer to a short document that we have just issued as External Action Service. Is our mission statement. We have been working for more than a year in a very bottom-up approach in order to define who we are, with whom we work, how do we work, which kind of partnership, which is the scope of our activity. There are a lot of elements into this one page of which is the condensation of many hours of work and reflection. And I think that the important thing is for the External Action Service to prove the added value that we can bring to the table, to make it sure that other institutions are not creating within their own structures duplication of what we do, and that we can be able as External Action Service to inject into the work of the institutions the external dimension, the external vision, I would say. We have a tendency to legislate having in mind the needs of the member states, but we need to, especially during a geopolitical situation as the one that we are facing, or a geopolitical commission, we need to include the external dimension as a constitutive element. And that's where I think we can have a lot of added value. So to answer your question, I think that there is a lot of margin to improve the way the External Action Service can contribute to the work of the European Union. And it is very important that this contribution is properly included and considered in this context.
One of the areas actually the External Action Service has taken the lead is that in combating disinformation, and in many ways you have put in place the structures and the mechanisms to enable the fight against disinformation, because the war in Ukraine is just one way that Putin is assaulting Europe. There has been a concerted assault on our democracy because of that extensive weaponization of disinformation. Can you perhaps tell us a bit more about the work that you have been doing exactly in that field? Because it's hugely important, as I said, especially when it comes to safeguarding our democracy and the health of our public discourse.
You are absolutely right. I mean, disinformation is an extremely powerful instrument that has been used in a very shrewd way by Putin, by its government in this war, and beyond. It's not only Russia, also in China. There is a lot of let's say, of work that is done through disinformation, through the development of specific narratives. The High Representative Borrell very often speaks about the battle of narratives, about the fact that each one is trying to promote its own way of telling the story. About, for example, think about the fact that autocracies are more able to respond to a specific crisis than democracies, and that was very much visible during this debate was very much present during the period of the COVID crisis. And then we have to say that unfortunately, maybe you may have short-term gains, but over the medium term, democracies provide better answers and much more solid. I think once again what is happening now in Shanghai, and you realize that the response has been quick, but has not been necessarily thorough. So once again, all this to say that there is also competition in terms of systems, in terms of the way we tell stories. And what we are trying to do when it comes to disinformation, to manipulation of information, is to debunk this and to provide, let's say, facts and going against myths. Russia has presented, Putin has presented the war in Ukraine as a war to denazify the country, to make it democratic, to rescue the Russian people in Luhansk and Donetsk. And we have seen that all this has just been a lie. But as a matter of fact, it has been a lie. It has managed to have a lot of impact. There were still people at the beginning of the crisis asking and being convinced that there were a lot of aggression against Russian-speaking people in this region, while we have had the presence of the OSCE observers on the ground for years that were giving us a clear sense of the situation on the ground. So we are trying to debunk, but we need to move further in fighting disinformation, and we have to be able to do it in a way which is not giving the possibility to those who want to conduct malign actions to exploit the openness of our systems. What I want to say is that we need to be able to say that when there is a manipulation of information for reasons that are willing to create problems, to generate change of governments, influence electoral processes, then we have to be able to respond in a much more vigorous way. In the same way, I think, in the logic that we have developed when we have put in place the anti-economic coercion instruments. Once again, the openness of our systems cannot become a weakness and cannot be abused by persons or countries or governments that are willing to create problems to us. So from that point of view, we are putting on the table a number of ideas, a number of proposals to the member states for their consideration in order to try to face this and to remedy this situation.
If I may bring us back a little bit to the war in Ukraine, it has also put in sharp focus the need for strategic autonomy for the European Union as a whole on a variety of areas, not least on energy. There is a lot of discussion about diversifying away from energy coming from regimes like the one in Russia, but that is also happening in the context of the EU's efforts to diversify away from fossil fuels into more clean and renewable sources of energy. Do you think what's happening now in Ukraine will accelerate the European Union's shift towards cleaner and more renewable sources of energy? And how quickly do you think we will be able to really cut ourselves off regimes like the one in Kremlin, who using often our dependence on energy as a way to apply pressure on us, economic and other?
There is a lot of reflection within the European Union about the, let's say, how to reduce unwanted dependencies. And more than that, I mean, I would say dependencies that are becoming vulnerabilities for us. And with this, I want to mean when you are economically too dependent on one or another country, one or another sector, and this is creating a problem once you have to make choices. If you remember the point of the diversification of supplies or diversification of routes in energy dates back to 2016. We were starting considering this after the invasion of Crimea and the first actions of Russia in Ukraine. We have done some work from there, but clearly not enough and not fast enough, because we are still now largely dependent on the oil and gas coming from Russia. In our world, you cannot think of, how to say, reshoring everything. Let's be clear. And this is not the case. We're not speaking about the fact of having everything produced within Europe. But we need to be able to reduce, once again, our dependencies in order to avoid that they become vulnerabilities. And that's the key. When it comes to the energy, there's been already a huge effort that has been done in these last few months in order to reduce this dependency, and more will come. Together with the European Commission, we are working on specific actions and initiatives that can reduce this dependence and can avoid, let's say, the fact of buying oil and gas from Russia. It means a very significant diversification of supply sources. It means moving to much more to, let's say, transition hydrocarbons like gas and liquefied gas. But it means also, more than everything else, accelerating our green transition in the use of renewables, the completion of the integration of the energy market in Europe, and also a redefinition of the relations with a number of countries that are providers of energy. But once again, I think that it's very important to the concept of reducing dependencies that can become vulnerabilities for us.
Indeed. Perhaps, and as we're coming to a close, I know the demands of your times are big. One of the questions from our audience, Thomas in Germany, is asking a little bit to discuss a bit more the question of Ukraine's membership of the European Union. Thomas' question is, when do you think that accession negotiations can start, and what can be the perspective of EU membership for Ukraine?
Well, this is, let's say, a very complex question, and maybe it's difficult to give a sort of a straightforward answer, because when it comes to membership and when it comes to accession processes, you need to be able also to take on you the responsibilities that are linked to membership. And certainly Ukraine, unfortunately, in this moment, under the present circumstances, is not in a position to go that way. But let's say the accession process is made of many steps, and I think that we are going very fast with the first steps of this process. As I was saying, after the request for accession, the opinion, which is the first step, was requested in time record by the Council to the Commission. It took 1 week. The Commission has provided the questionnaire to the Ukrainians, again in time record, in maybe 1 month. Ukraine has replied to this in record time, in a matter of days. And the Commission is working on providing an opinion in a timeline which I cannot, let's say, foresee at the moment, but I think that it will be quite quick. And then, if this is the case, we have to see how this is going to be drafted, the opinion. And which are the elements that could allow the negotiation to start. I don't want to sound elusive, but we need to be also clear that this is a process. It's one thing is the political signal, and another story is the negotiating process and the actual membership to the EU, knowing that again, I mean, membership is not only a security element, but implies much more than that. That said, I'm also very much aware that Ukraine is doing a fantastic job, not only in defending its country and in defending the values in which the European Union believes, but also in continuing its administrative activity in spite of the circumstances, showing a real sense of determination. So this will certainly have an impact on the decision that the member states will have to take when it will come to agreeing on the its request of membership for the European Union.
Indeed, and like you said, I think the message coming from Brussels, but also from various capitals, is one that certainly signals that Ukraine is seen as part of Europe and is welcome to join the European Union. There is another group of countries, of course, waiting in the waiting room in the Western Balkans that have been in a journey towards membership for a while. How do you think events affect them, and to what extent can the EU, as one of our viewers is asking, support them against the Russian influence that has been in many ways functioning as a counterbalance to the prospect of EU membership?
Well, first of all, let me say one thing, which I think it's important. We can certainly support them, and we are willing, and we have been willing since many years to have the Western Balkans part of the European Union. I remember that maybe the enlargement, the fifth enlargement, was not yet finished when the president of the Commission at the time, Romano Prodi, was saying that the enlargement process will not be complete as long as the Western Balkans will not be part of the European Union. So we go back to decades of work that we've been doing in order to make this happen. It's a long process. As I said, I mean, membership implies a lot of responsibilities, and you want to have, let's say, member states who are able to stand these responsibilities. But I would like to say also that there must be a lot of determination and willingness to do so. If I look at countries like Albania or like North Macedonia, they have never played with the idea of using Russia or China, saying, you see, if you're not getting me in, then I can go into another direction. They have been very consistent in, on the contrary, having a very clear the path, very clearly set. And they have been saying whatever is going to happen, including not allowing us in, will not move us from the determination of being with you, because we feel that we are part of you, we are part of the European Union. And this is a very important element, because it's the playing on 2 or 3 tables does not necessarily make your case better for joining the European Union. So it's not just a question of, let's say, having alternatives. It's which is the decision that a country makes. Also because the negotiations for joining the European Union, it's a question that goes well beyond 1 or 2 governments. It takes years, and so you must have a clear determination of the whole country to move in that direction.
Indeed. I have the feeling we could carry on our conversation for much longer, but I know you need to be elsewhere. Hopefully, we will have the chance to talk again, perhaps in a much more relaxed context with less pressure on your time. But until then, I want to thank you very much for all your candid answers and the very timely and pertinent discussion we just had. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Petros, and thanks to all the viewers and the listeners. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Indeed. And I would like to also thank all of those of you who joined us for today's discussion. Stay tuned, follow us on social media, or check our website, europeanmovement.eu, for more events like this one. In the meantime, have a good day and a very good week. See you soon.